So who am I? Well, this is not, I'm not telling you any of this to brag. Just kind of a list of my achievements so you know who's talking to you. I was the New Zealand Young Entrepreneur of the Year in 2004. Also the same year, the New Zealand High Tech Young Achiever of the Year. My first major company, Orcon, which I ran from 18 to 29, I sold for $25 million to Kordia, which was an SOE. I retired for 5 years from about 30 to 35. I have a new internet company, Voyager, which has about 1% market share in broadband and 20% in domain names. And that was the fastest growing company in all of New Zealand in 2014. So we went from $500,000 revenue to $12 million revenue over a 24-month period. I've got half of my kind of investment money is in commercial properties and half in internet. My hobbies, I suppose, would be photography, travel, and being a pilot. I'm 2 weeks away from having my helicopter pilot's license, which has been a nice, satisfying thing. I've visited 70 countries in the last 4 years. But what about happiness and fulfillment? Now, as I say, I don't say any of that to impress you, because you can be wildly successful and not at all fulfilled. And a lot of people think, when I get this, or when I'm successful, or when I reach my goal, then surely I'm going to be happy. And then of course they get terribly depressed, or perhaps it doesn't happen, or that there's always something that gets put off. And so it took me a while to get the hang of this, and I think I'm getting the hang of it. But there's a comedian. A good example of this, maybe one of the best examples that I think, is there's a US comedian, and in the 80s and 90s he became the most well-known, most popular comedian in all of the US. And then he said, well, that's not enough, I'm more driven, I want more success. So he said, I want to have my own TV show. So he got his own TV show. And then he said, well, that's not enough, I want it to be the most popular TV show in all of the United States. And he got that to happen. And then he said, I want to go into movies. And he did that successfully. And then he said, I want to make movies where I'm not a comedian, I want to win an Academy Award. And he did that. Do any of you know who I'm talking about so far? No, it's not Jim Carrey. No. Yes, Robin Williams. So Mork and Mindy was the TV show. And then, he had that, it's just slipped my name of the movie, but there was the movie that he did that he was like a maths teacher or something, and it was all, drama, and so not comedy. So he kept on achieving all of these kind of goals throughout his life, had a beautiful family, 4 kids, loved by not just people in America, but all over the world. And then a couple of years ago, he hung himself. So he was wildly successful. He achieved everything he wanted to be, but he wasn't fulfilled. So there is a real gap. And so I've kind of been on a bit of that journey. In some ways, I've had a blessed life, but I have been through some hardship. But I wouldn't trade that hardship for anything. And so I'll sort of tell you how that's all unfolded over the last few years. I'm going to do things chronologically because that's the easiest way for me to, remember and cover everything. So 0 to 10 years old, when I was, both my parents are librarians, so very well educated people. I had a very loving household. When I was 5 years old, I went to school for about 2 months, and then someone in my class threw a paper dart at the teacher, and the teacher turned around and thought it was me. And this is the day when corporal punishment was allowed. So the teacher then pulled me up in front of the class, pulled my pants down, and belted me as a 5-year-old quite hard. And so I was kind of in tears and had these strap marks on me and this kind of thing. And that was the days that you were allowed to do that. And then I went home, and my dad, being quite well, obviously any parent, but some parents didn't care about that sort of stuff, but my dad wasn't having anything of that. So he pulled me out of school, said, that's it, you're never going to go to school again, and you'll be homeschooled. And my dad was kind of a bit of a genius, almost autistic, I think. And not a heap of common sense. So the first thing that he did is try and teach me at 5 years old algebra. So I remember coming home from school, and he's like, okay, you're being homeschooled. If there's X apples and Y bananas, how many oranges do you have? And I'm scratching my head thinking X's and Y's and blah, and so I sort of said, watermelons, and then he's like, what are you, you're not learning, you're an idiot kind of thing. So it only took him about a week to give up on teaching me anything, because he wanted me to be like a calculus math genius, and there was no kind of intermediate steps or anything. And so pretty rapidly what happened is he was a writer, he got left to his own devices, and we lived in a neighbourhood where I didn't have very many kids around, so I just ended up being basically alone for the first sort of 10 years of my life. And I taught myself to read through comics books, and one of my favourite comics books was Scrooge McDuck. I used to love the fact that he'd, swim in all this money and that kind of thing. And but I couldn't do anything else. I wasn't social. I couldn't, kick a ball. I couldn't write. I, didn't do new maths. Had any sort of, traditional type stuff. And I felt as a kid this kind of sense of lack. We didn't have a lot of money. We weren't, poor, but we didn't have Christmases because my dad didn't like kind of being humiliated by the fact that we, couldn't afford presents. I got a paper run when I was too young, and I kind of lied about my age to get my paper run. Then I bought my own bike, so I lied about having a bike, said, yes, I've got a bike to do the paper run. Then I used to walk the paper run, and then I saved up, and once I had a bike, I got 3 paper runs, and so I used to do 3 paper runs before school, and kind of, felt self-sufficient. But at the end of the day, putting everything in context, all of us here are supremely lucky because we're born in New Zealand. And so even if you're super, super poor in New Zealand, 2/3 of the world doesn't have access to clean water or sanitation or all those kind of things. So we do have to bear in mind that no matter how bad your situation is in this country, we actually already won the lottery. And so I'm not going to say, poor me, I had a terrible childhood or anything. As I say, I had loving parents, but I felt this kind of scarcity. And the one thing that my dad did say is, my dad said, you can be anything you want, you can do anything you want, don't ever take any instructions from anyone else. He was a very kind of independent, kind of person. So moving on to my teens, 10 to 20, when I was 11 years old, the 1987 share market crash happened. So in most of the world it was known as Black Monday because they were behind us, but we were sort of ahead, so it was called Black Tuesday. And there's a saying that, I don't know who said it, but it might have been Warren Buffett or someone, if your plumber or your hairdresser starts telling you about shares to invest in, then it's time to get out. And my dad was the typical kind of very, very intellectual person, but who got suckered into the share market hype. And so it was only about, I think, August 1987, my dad mortgaged our house to the hilt to buy Goldcorp shares and a few other shares. And he kind of thought, well, Goldcorp shares will be, a good idea because everything's backed by gold. So even if the share market crashes, we've got that kind of thing. But unfortunately, Goldcorp was a supreme scam where all they did was print share certificates. They never had any gold. So, and I don't know whether those people went to jail or whatever. But my parents lost everything. So I already felt poor. And then I felt like, oh no, we're really, we've got to start again because we had, we did own our own house and we had a mortgage, but things weren't dire. And then all of a sudden things were dire. And then the stress of that basically made my parents split up. And then my mum became a solo mum. And then all of a sudden she put me back in school again because she couldn't leave me at home alone. So from 5 to 11, I basically was, kind of alone. And then after the share market crash, there was all this kind of, additional financial stress. And then I was put back into school. And there's a saying, 3 generations, rags to riches and back again, and that's pretty obvious what that means, but oftentimes the children of poor parents get really, really, really motivated to go and make a whole heap of money, and then their kids are rich and spoiled and they have no motivation at all, so then they lose all the money, and then their kids are poor, and then it kind of goes on again. So obviously there's some very fabulously wealthy European families that doesn't happen, but as a kind of cycle, I was at the bottom of the cycle and I wanted to dig myself out. And oftentimes in life there's these seminal moments that can be life-changing. And as some of you will know if you've read, books like The Secret or whatever, there is this law of attraction. And, some people think, well, there's no kind of airy-fairy law, but effectively what I think of the law of attraction is the basically the results of the reticular activating cortex. So in our brains, we have this thing called the reticular activating cortex, and that tells us basically what to pay attention to. So, for example, if you buy a red sports car and you've never seen that red sports car anywhere else before, all of a sudden, you'll see that red sports car all over the place. Or, ladies, how often have you thought, oh, this is a unique dress, I'll buy this dress, I haven't seen it, and then all of a sudden you go to a party and someone else is wearing the same dress. That's because your reticular activating cortex is all of a sudden paying attention to those kind of things. And it's one of the reasons that if you have some moment in your life where you get something makes you interested in soccer, all of a sudden you start to see all these opportunities around soccer. You hear the coach say, does anyone want to play on Saturday? And then all of a sudden that can kind of lead you down a path. So for me, this share market crash, not understanding why my parents were so intellectually brainy. My dad had a doctorate in philosophy. And so what I started thinking is, hang on, maybe actually business people are the smartest people in the world, and maybe I should be a business person. Maybe I don't want to be a traditional, intellectual or, university person. And so I started basically becoming fascinated by that sort of thing. I've got 7 uncles who are lawyers, and so, I'd go to family dinners and things, and I'd say, what's a company? How do you start one? What's a shareholder? What's a director? Even as kind of 11 or 12, even when I was in school. And the first book that I read, which I recommend to anyone, was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That's the absolute foundation of all personal development and self-help books. Then the second book I ever read was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Also a great book, getting a little bit dated now. And then, of course, because my reticular activating cortex was interested in business and things, I was one of the first people to sign up for the Fletcher Challenge Young Enterprise program in school, which is now, you can do it as a curriculum, but back when I was in school, it had to be, after hours and that kind of thing. And basically, you got the opportunity as a kid to start a real company, list on the New Zealand, not the share market, but the share register, take $100 off your parents for share capital and, learn all these terms. And both my businesses were, in sixth form and seventh form, were dismal failures. Well, actually they weren't, but my business in seventh form was a printing company, and I did stationery and business cards and all that kind of thing. But what we did is we sort of had permission from the teacher to use the school printing room to do some of this stuff. And then all of a sudden he didn't realize how successful the business had become. So the reason that the business was really successful is because we had very low cost of sale by using the school printing room, and then we were printing all these business cards for local businesses at a good deal. And so once the principal found out that there was this kind of revenue leakage, then we had to adjust our costs, and then the business didn't work so well. So, but the thing that was good about Young Enterprise is it taught me all the terminology of business. And if you want to be in medicine, you have to learn the terminology of medicine, right? If you want to be in IT, you have to learn the terminology of IT. There's a language of any industry or any success, and you have to learn that language. And so what I was doing with Young Enterprise was learning the language of business and the terminology of business so that I was then prepared when an opportunity came along. And one of the other things that I did, I saw this infomercial. Probably some of you will have seen it. Would have been 1995. There's this guy called Tony Robbins, big teeth, annoying as hell. But he had this thing called Personal Power 2, which was kind of how to run your own brain, how to think positively. And as I say, I was into that stuff. Even from the time that I was 11 to 17 or 18, I literally read, maybe not hundreds, Tony Robbins has read hundreds, but I read dozens and dozens and dozens of books. Business, personal development, autobiographies of, famous people. And the amazing thing about, reading is that you can take someone's entire lifetime, an entire lifetime of experience. Someone might have spent 30 years, 40 years learning about some topic. You can pick that up in a weekend and learn, all of the things that they've learned, all of the mistakes that they've learned. So my, one of the books that I had was the 400 brief autobiographies, 2-page autobiographies of every single person on the Forbes 400. So the entire Forbes 400 condensed down to a page per person. And I remember reading that as like 13 or 14, and I was fascinated. Oh, wow, this person didn't go to university. This person didn't do this. Bill Gates was in there, that kind of thing. And so that gave me the confidence that it seemed to me that 2 out of those 3 people had never been to university, which, is kind of true. So I was thinking, hang on, all these rich people, they just seem to do stuff, And then so I was gathering all of these kind of tools in preparation. And then we move on to the next kind of thing, which was 20s to 30s. And basically I was about 19 and I was in university. I hadn't decided to be a dropout at that stage. I was studying electrical engineering, and then we got internal email in the university, and you could send email to your colleagues. And then all of a sudden the university linked that to the outside world, so you could kind of send emails to anyone. And so I was fascinated, like, oh, I can just sit at Auckland University and I can email some random person that I can kind of discover, and then they can email me back. So I emailed a few people overseas and kind of had these weird pen pals, and I thought this is really cool. And I just had this kind of vision flash where I was like, faxes are going to be obsolete. You can email documents to people. Email's obviously a killer app, and it still is the killer app of the internet. It has been for a long, long time. But to me, I just thought it was super, super cool, and I couldn't understand how my classmates weren't super pumped and super excited about it as I was. And so I stayed in university for a while, but pretty soon I started thinking, I've got to be in this thing. And I didn't have a computer. I didn't know how to program. I didn't know how the internet worked. I didn't know any of that stuff. But what I wanted to do was have an internet company. I believed it was going to be the biggest internet company in the world, or at least the biggest that I could possibly make it. I believed in myself thanks to Tony Robbins. I was going to think and grow rich. And so I set out to do it. And so one day I went to the company's office and I said, I want to start a company. How do I do it? I don't know. And they said, kind of condescendingly, well, are you over 18? I didn't look over 18. And then they said yes. And then they said, well, it's just a $60 application fee. You fill out these share registers, you take your ID, and then you get a company. So I was like, oh, cool. Okay, I've done that. I've got a company. And then I said, I've got to have, what else do I need? I'm probably going to need a post box. So I went to the post box, said, how do I open a post box? And I sorted that out. And then I said, I'm going to need a cell phone. So I went to a cell phone company and got a cell phone. I was Bell South customer 150, so my number to this day is still 021 366 666, which is an awesome number because I was first in the queue for a good number. And I just kind of kept on doing all these things that were like one step in front of the other, even though I didn't really know what I was going to do. I just decided I'll just do something, just get a bit closer, design a logo, come up with a name. Orcon came from me writing a list of prefixes and suffixes like, Microsoft, mega hard, com this, com that, NZ, blah, blah. And I was like, I want something that's unique because it's going to be a global company. I don't want like Glenfield Computer Services, Internet Limited, that's then like limiting me. So I was thinking big. And then I kind of went and talked to Tim and Nick Wood, the iHug brothers. They had just started up in kind of 1995. They had a little thing going, and they seemed to be going gangbusters, and people were starting to sign up. So then I did a deal with them where I could sell iHug connections, but make a margin. So what I would do is I would buy connections off them for $35 a month flat rate, and then I would sell them for $45 a month flat rate, which is what they were selling them for. So I could compete directly. And then I kind of thought, well, and then I would bill the customers myself so that they were my customers because I wanted the billing relationship. And then I thought, well, what happens if I want to move the customers? So I got my own phone number so that the customers would call my number, and then I could call divert that number to any other provider. And then once I had about 200 customers, I started to have buying power. So then I went to, SignSurf and another company called Web Internet, and then Extra, and said, I've got 200 customers, I've got 500 customers, I've got 1,000 customers. If I have all the usernames and passwords, give them to you in a list, and I'll move my number to you. Can you give me a better deal? So within a pretty short space of time, I had, 1,000 or 2,000 customers on Orcon as far as they were concerned. And then I had enough margin that I started hiring technical people, and I got a technical business partner who was kind of my other half. And then it was kind of a process of elimination where every single year that I ran Orcon, my business job would change. So in the first year, it was like, do the banking, do the branding, do the everything. And then in the second year, it was like, okay, do everything apart from some tech stuff that this other person's doing. And then it was like, do everything apart from answer the phone, because you've hired someone to answer the phone. And then in the third year, it was do everything apart from answer the phone, do the accounts, do some technical stuff, do whatever. And so often your job as a CEO is to just kind of realize what needs to be happened, do everything else, and then hire people, if you can make it work. And so one thing that I would do is every single January after New Year's, it's New Year resolution time, I would sit down on a piece of paper and I'd say, how am I going to double the size of the business this year? I must double the size of the business. What are the things that I would need to do in order for that to happen? And of course, when you're small, that's relatively easy to do. But as you get bigger and bigger, that gets harder and harder. So I basically ran Orcon I started with $100, and I went to the bank one day and I said, can I have an overdraft? And they said no, so I never asked again. So I started Orcon with $100. It was cash flow positive from day one. I did almost go bankrupt 3 times, but basically 7 years out of 9 years that were kind of measurable, I over double the size of that business every year. So even when it was like $15 million turnover, then the next year it was 30, and then it was a sale. And basically what happened is, next slide's probably appropriate. So one picture, that's the Orcon racing team, so we had a little bit of fun as well. So when I was 25, I followed testosterone, and I decided we wanted to be part of the V8 supercars, so we sponsored a race team, had promo girls, all that kind of thing. One of my goals that I'd written down when I was 15 years old, thanks to some of my books, and this is very, very important, is that there's some weird power about writing goals down, and that if it's in your head, it's not a goal. But if you write a goal down, and this has been proven, and you write it down and then you throw the piece of paper away, you are twice as likely to achieve that goal. So I always try and write things down. And one of the goals that I wrote down when I was 15 years old is I want a Ferrari by 25. And when I was 25, I couldn't afford a Ferrari. Orcon wasn't making that much money, but I kind of got to the point where I was like, am I going to be a failure and like not get that goal? And I found that goal and I went back to it and I said, I'm going to make it work. So on my 25th birthday, that's me with my mum, I bought myself a brand new Ferrari, even though I lived in a rented brick and tile house in Glenfield. So I had a house that was worth that I was renting, that was worth less than my car, but it was important to me to get that goal. And the last picture on the bottom left is me with a check for $25 million from Kordia. And so basically, that went great. I was proud of myself. I tapped myself on the back, but I was burnt out. I had been working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 years. And so I decided to kind of retire and sell up. Bought myself shiny new suits. I had a $10 million house on the beach, so I had this $25 million check I had to give some to my business partner, but I had all this money in the bank. Within 3 weeks, I'd spent $18 million on property. So I had a beachfront place, I had a farm in the country, I had a place in Queenstown, which was stupid, and it was like July 2007, right? So I paid this top end money. I'd done really, really well with Orcon, and then I paid top end money for all this property, and then the property market crashed, and then I had almost no more money, and then I had to pay out my ex-partner, and all of a sudden I had no cash, and I had to start putting mortgages on things, and I started feeling poor. And then I started getting depressed because I didn't have any purpose. And when your identity is a company or something for 10 years and you run and run and run and run and run, and then all of a sudden you stop, it leaves this really weird void. And I think it's pretty common for founders. So if there's any of you that have successful businesses and you're thinking about selling, one of the things you're going to have to potentially contend with is massive depression, even if it's wildly successful. Because what do? So what I did is started dating pageant girls and throwing wild parties and going crazy and drinking and basically being a lout. And effectively, I was kind of like a 20-year-old or a teenager because I hadn't had my 20s. All my friends were partying and doing all that sort of stuff when they were 20. I didn't do any of that. I never went out. I didn't go on holiday. I didn't have a 20s. So I felt like I'd kind of sacrificed my life, and then I wanted to play catch up. So I had this kind of wild ride, and then I met the love of my life, and I got married. But one of the things about being an entrepreneur is that you're always kind of pushing. And so what I was doing, unbeknownst to me, is that I was kind of still searching, still pushing. And you can buy pleasure, but you can't buy happiness. And at that stage in my life, I had not worked that out. And so even though I had an amazing wife, even though I had a $10 million house on the beach, even though I had all these kind of things, I was actually not happy. I wasn't fulfilled because I didn't have a company. I started Voyager kind of trying to fill a bit of a gap in the void. But at the end of the day, I was actually, looking back, amazingly surprised at how kind of unfulfilled I was, and how once you start to get things and they don't make you happy, then you kind of start to want more things. And if they don't make you happy, then it's kind of this weird cycle. I don't mean to be up here and sound ungrateful. I know that I've got, money, and there's nothing worse and there's nothing more annoying than someone who's wealthy and miserable, right? That's why Donald Trump is so annoying, because he's such a piece of crap, if you'll excuse me, and he's so miserable, such a grumpy old bastard. But I wasn't grumpy, I just wasn't happy with myself. And as a result, unfortunately, my wife left me. That was completely my fault. She is a lovely human being. I was kind of searching for more. I was unfulfilled. I wasn't giving her what she needed. I was focusing on myself. And, as a man, we have the advantage of, because we're on our team, most of the people in the audience are obviously men. As a man, we have, the traditional advantages of like physical size and all those kind of things. But the woman's advantage is a more evolved heart. And I can tell you from experience, men, if you think that you're going to be sneaky and, have some fun on the side and whatever, and your wife's not going to find out or whatever, it's always going to come out, because a woman kind of always knows. And that was my stuff up. Anyway, the person that I ended up hurting actually was me. It wasn't my wife. So next slide. This was my house. This was my awesome house that I had. And then I went through this huge emotional crash. I bought my house for $8.5 million. I spent $1.5 million on it. Owed me $10 million. And when I got divorced, I decided, bugger it, I'll just sell it at a loss, because I want to move on and do things. But actually, losing my wife and then selling my house was the most destabilizing thing that I could possibly do, because your house is your home. Within 2 weeks, my dog died. I had some other things happen. And I basically just then ended up in a really bad state, like really bad. I'm not going to go into it too much, but it was a bad place. And I'm going to show you these pictures. This is me. I really hit rock bottom. I was in the hospital. I was an alcoholic. I was abusing drugs. And you kind of think, I had some success, but it was nothing to do with happiness. It's nothing to do with fulfillment. And it took me a couple of years to dig myself out. One of the things that I did was basically return to Tony Robbins. Get away from those horrible slides. But I wanted to be real with you, because I don't want to, I want to actually say I've been through this journey. It's not like fake kind of pump up. I'm not here to tell you, I'm so awesome and everything. There's been real stuff that's happened. So the guy on the right, I don't know whether you can see, that's Tony Robbins. That's my idol. I actually, as I say, as an 18-year-old kid, I'd listened to his tapes, and then I decided, or something happened where I saw a flyer or something, was going to be in Auckland, and then I kind of thought, 20 years ago, Tony Robbins helped me with my business. Maybe he can help me, personally. Now, maybe some of you know who Tony Robbins is, maybe you don't, but if any of you have Netflix, I really encourage you to watch I Am Not Your Guru on Netflix. It's basically kind of explains what he does. People think that he's kind of some American like pump-up guy, motivation guy, but basically what he does is he teaches you how to run your own brain. He teaches you that your thoughts are not you. And most of us go around life kind of just thinking, I'm having this thought, therefore that must be me. But actually, our thoughts can be quite independent. They can be influenced by physiology. If you're hungry, you can get hangry. And if you're not paying attention, things can influence you that are not actually you. So he's kind of an expert in that sort of thing. And if you are struggling, I encourage you, as like he's one of the angels to go and have a look at. But I'm not your guru. So I actually ended up following Tony Robbins around for a year. I took a year off. I did 16. He's got 9 different courses, and I did every single course twice. over a period of a year. And then I started taking my staff at Voyager. So I've got over 100 staff now. And every year, 20 of us go to Sydney, which is the closest Unleash the Power Within. And one of the first things that you do is a fire walk. So you walk across 5 meters of flaming hot coals. You hypnotize yourself. You break through your barriers and that kind of thing. And what I thought is that, Tony helped me, but it was all in me. And I was starting to heal myself, but what I wanted to do was share that. And obviously, if you share something, it becomes so much more powerful. So now, me and my staff together are trying to come through, overcome some of these kind of things. And rather than having me sort of separate from my staff, I view it as much more of a partnership. And I want them to be as happy and productive as they can be. So anything that's helped me, I want to share with them. After my year of Tony Robbins, I kind of was like Tony Robbins out. So I still go once a year with my team. And then I kind of went on a spirituality path. So the next thing that I did was I met Tony Robbins' kind of personal spiritual leader, who's a guy called Guru Singh. And he's the guy there. This photograph in gold is actually a photograph that I took because I picked up photography 3 years ago. And basically he's kind of the head of Kundalini Yoga worldwide. There's 22 different branches of yoga, but he's kind of the only Westerner to reach the top of an Indian level kind of thing. So I spent a year learning breathing techniques, meditation, Kundalini, everything with him. And he is another angel, but as I say, he's Tony Robbins' personal spiritual leader. And one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of go to the top. Like, if I want to learn about personal, like Tony Robbins, he's the number one personal performance enhancement coach or whatever. Serena Williams uses him. When President Clinton was being impeached, Tony Robbins was his personal advisor. But Guru Singh's like a master of kind of that spiritual realm, and I wanted to go right to the top, so I decided to choose him as a person. And so I guess as I sort of said, one of the most insufferable individuals is someone rich and miserable. The biggest failure in life would be becoming a huge success and never being contented. And I guess what I've discovered is that it's a choice. Every single moment of every single day, you're deciding what the meaning of something is. And you can decide whether that meaning's good or you can decide whether that meaning's bad. And if you decide whether that meaning's good and it's empowering, well, why not just make that decision? And there's things that you can do to help that, like meditation and mindfulness and all those kind of things. One of the things that I do that Tony Robbins and a lot of high-performance people do is like a morning routine or a morning mindset. I don't know whether any of you have that, but I do 20 minutes of meditation in the morning. Meditation's not for everyone. I recommend it to everyone, but not everyone's tried it, not everyone's done it. But I just find that actually Jack Dorsey of Twitter says that if I'm busy, I meditate for an hour. If I'm really busy, I meditate for 2 hours. So he's really, really into it. And what he says is that the more that he meditates, the more productive he is. And I kind of find that if I don't meditate for, a week or something, I start to get scatterbrained. I start to get, kind of these random thoughts coming in. And so it's nice to have that way to kind of calm the mind down. Happiness is a choice. As I say, some people, if they're in traffic, will be like, oh, that person cut me off. They make me so angry. My dad used to say that all the time. He was very much a victim of external circumstance. Like that person cut me off so much. But at the end of the day, maybe they didn't see you. Maybe there's another explanation. So, you can think things that are all in your own mind, and some of the time, those things can be unempowering. So I'm sort of still on this journey. I think I've come like a hugely long way. But there are obviously techniques and things out there. And as I say, from being a very financially wealthy person who is very unhappy to being a person who's happy kind of regardless has been a real transformation for me. And I just want to say that it's possible because sometimes you don't even think about those things. Sometimes you just kind of delay your own happiness where you're like, I'm just surviving. I'm not going to do anything, until I get this thing that I want. And then you get that thing that you want, and then you find out it doesn't make you happy, and then you have some other thing that you want. And, we could all get hit by a bus. We could all have a heart attack. One of my friends recently just got brain cancer. As you get older and older, you have more and more people start to, die in your life or have things. And so, why deny yourself that joy? Guru Singh has a podcast. If anyone's interested, his podcast's awesome. And obviously Tony Robbins has a lot of stuff. I encourage you to go see him. Both of those guys have made a big impact to me, and they're much better at I am than all of this kind of stuff. So success is a science. If you want to be successful, whatever it is you want, as I say, you can read a book, you can find out about it, you can go on YouTube. There's all these things, but success has leaves traces and it has steps, and you can follow the breadcrumbs. If you want to be successful in something, there's 100% guaranteed someone who has been successful in that thing, and all you need to do is 100% copy what they have done, add your own little special sauce, keep on going, keep on being determined, and you will be successful. It's not a kind of secret thing anymore. If you haven't persevered enough, then you just kind of keep on going. But the thing about fulfillment is not a science. Fulfillment is an art. So there's a science to success, but there's an art to fulfillment. And fulfillment has its own special ingredients and things that will work for you. But I think it's as important, and I've gone over that a few times. But whatever it is that can make you fulfilled in your life, it's actually going to make you so much more productive. When we're happy, we deal with things so much more elegantly. So don't kind of beat yourself up and put pressure on yourself in terms of motivation. It's much easier to kind of be pulled rather than pushed. So instead of beating yourself up on, I'm a procrastinator, I need to do this, that kind of thing, get excited about your goals. Get things that give you juice and get you juice, so that instead of being kind of having to whip yourself towards your goals, you're actually dragged towards your goals and your vision. And things like lists and visualization, all that sort of things are helpful with it. So it took me over 40 years to kind of figure out that happiness and success are completely non-correlated. And that's kind of the main point that I wanted to make. A morning routine is really helpful. I do, as I say, a little bit of meditation, a little bit of yoga. And the other thing is that I find really important is basically gratitude training. It sounds corny, but it's literally impossible for you to have more than one emotion in your body at the same time. And our physiology and our emotions are kind of tied together. So if you're depressed, if someone behind that curtain over there was depressed, I could probably tell you that they kind of look like this, right? Their shoulder's going to be down, their head's going to be down. If someone's like confident, then they're kind of going to be like this, even if you don't see them. So your body can do those emotions. And you can't have as I say, you can't have two emotions in your body at the same time. Now, if you're, say, angry, right, and then you tell yourself through affirmations or whatever, I'm happy, then your brain can kind of come back and say, I'm not bloody happy, and then you'll be more angry, right? But one of the most powerful emotions that can drive out any other emotion is gratitude. And the Indians talk about this a lot in their kind of meditative study. There's a number of stories and allegories and things that I won't go into, but if you are grateful about something, you can't be angry at the same time. And so if you are unhappy or you have those kind of things going on, 3 minutes of gratitude training, there's a bunch of studies on it, scientifically will change your life. That's one of the things that can really turn around your mindset. And so that's something that I always do and has really, really made a difference. And normally what I do is I think of something big, like I'm grateful for, X, something medium, and then I'll even think of just something like I'm happy about the wind on my face. I'm happy that I had a swim this morning. I'm grateful for being alive. I'm grateful for being above ground. And what that does is it gets your brain to kind of recognize those things, because our brain is like a, millions and millions and millions of years old system. And in the days when we're in the jungle, of course we've got to be watching out for all these things like lions and tigers and what's going wrong. But these days there isn't really a lot that's actually dangerous to us. And so what happens is we get ourselves worked up by things that are not really dangerous. An email comes in and then we get reactionary, and then all of a sudden we're in this fight or flight response, and that can put stress on our adrenal glands. You're starting to get kind of fired up and that kind of thing. So a bit of meditation and a bit of gratitude training in the morning just gives your brain the space to say, oh, there's actually things that are good in the world. Not everything is this, kind of headache coming in. And I know how stressful IT is. And I think this has really made maybe some of you think, oh, this is corny, but this was the topic of the speech that I got given. And I know, like, my guys who are on call, 24/7, I had some really burnt out guys in the data center where it's like every time there's like something that's a fault or a customer has an issue, then they're snappy, they're rude to customers, this is like a personal attack to me. And since we've started doing some of these tools more and more in the office, there's a real sense of calm, and then that calm allows us to just kind of deal with whatever it is. So I think it's real type stuff. Little quote here that I like: nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. So for me, that's like my overall thing. And that, as I say, I wasn't immediately successful with Orcon. I had some stuff ups in my personal life. I stuffed up my health. I did a whole lot of things. I made a whole lot of mistakes, but the most important thing above all else, once you wrap all that up, is just to keep on going. And as I say, there's that saying, if you're entering hell, then, keep on going, just keep on pushing through. And one of the most difficult things that I've done recently, as I say, is getting my pilot's license. I didn't realize how difficult it was going to be, so it's taken a long time. That's my little trainer machine. But one of the things that's made me really happy is this year with my buddy. That's I now own half of a helicopter, which has been like a lifetime goal. And you can actually take the blades off a helicopter and put it in a 40-foot shipping container, and you can ship a 40-foot shipping container anywhere in the world in a couple of weeks for cheap. So we shipped our helicopter to Alaska, and we just did a 3 or 4 week 12,000-mile trip from Los Angeles to the Arctic Circle and back again. So that's a picture of us in Alaska, just at the Arctic Circle. So it's kind of like an amazing amount of freedom, and it's a whole new thing, to my life. But I almost gave up because pilot stuff is actually really hard. So I'm proud of myself that I kept on going. I don't think I'm super coordinated or anything like that, but keeping on trying, you get there. And now that I'm into aviation, it's been one of the most kind of joyous things in my life. There's something about flying that is really amazing. So just a few years ago, I was, as I say, in hospital, not well, had a real, kind of crisis, have turned that around. I'm not here to say how awesome I am, just here to say life's a journey. I love you all, and hope that you can take something from what I've said.